Welcome back to Speaking Truth to Goodness, where we, Patty Robron, Jerry Atkin, and Michaela McCormick, continue our journey through the landscapes of social change, community building, and personal transformation. In this episode, we tackle the delicate balance of learning from our mistakes, especially those rooted in white supremacy, and the crucial role of cultural humility in fostering cross-demographic relationships. We'll share stories of navigating through difficult conversations, learning from the resilience of Oregon's farm workers, and the importance of serving food as a gesture of unity and trust. As we explore these themes, we invite you to engage with us by liking, commenting, and subscribing. Follow our journey on Instagram for more behind-the-scenes content and discussions. Here it is.
We have to start accepting people where they are. I have 3 friends here who are Trump voters. Long pause as even I try to take that in. How is that possible? Because, well, let's make it snappy. Snap.
It's got to drink my daily poison.
Well, I was impressed that you used the words friends and Trump voters in the same sentence.
You know what? It's just like, so one of them watches Fox News all the time. Okay. I learn really interesting things when she talks to me that I never knew before, that don't happen to be true. But it's like, I've heard this phrase from all of them, Donald Trump is his own worst enemy. That his policies, whatever the hell those are good. I can't find them. But so they reject Trump, but they accept Trumpism. Now that's confusing. But it's like, so I told myself, it's a little embarrassing. I said, okay, practice what you preach. Talk to Trump voters. Don't just talk to people who echo back. So I sat down with 2 Trump voters and felt so good and got so many points for talking to Trump people, a retired prison warden. And I was just feeling so self-righteous and good until I discovered he was perhaps the most significant prison reformers as a warden. So the program Scared Straight, are you familiar with Scared Straight?
No.
It's a program of bringing high-risk youth into prisons. Why are you doing this?
My only reference for that is the Saturday Night Live sketch making fun of it. I'm really sorry about that.
Okay, you should be, and not in a judgmental way. But it's like there's a Native American who works here whose life was saved by that program. If only one person is saved, but so many more have. But here's the thing. So this guy, famous for doing all this, other things, is adamant. They say it's so great that you started Scared Straight. And he said, and he'll bang the table, no. I didn't start it. The inmates started it. They did all the work. I did none of it. Do not give me credit for this. Whoa, where'd that come from? Because this is a first-generation Slav. The adjective for Slavs when they immigrated was dumb Slav. And so he carries a lot of other information with him into this struggle. But it's just listening, and listening. If we don't listen, it's not going to happen. If we make prejudgments, it's going to be, no, it's not going to happen. So for me, I'm talking about myself now, though I feel pretty good at it, I'm not good enough at not making judgments. I mean, compared to 10, 20 years ago, no comparison. But we make the assumption thing, It's just like, no. What's actually here? Who are these people? What do they care about? What can we agree on and disagree? We can agree that our children need to be safe. We can disagree on what makes them safe. And we're going to, there's just a lot of work. But it has to start with humility. Cultural humility spreads through every race, gender, class, whatever you're talking about. I don't know. I mean, I know auto workers pretty well. I know steel workers pretty well. I don't know workers in a rendering plant. You know what a rendering plant is? It's tanning of skins, and it's dirty, filthy, hard work. You can't get the smell off your body no matter what you do. I don't know that reality. I know auto workers. So I wrote a sentence once. My favorite sentence in the Bible is Jesus wept. That's 2 words. My sentence is humility is endless. It's what I call the iron law of subjectivity, and that's a little abstract, but it's like we see the world through our experiences. Mm-hmm. It's a lens through which everything is seen. Yeah, and don't make me laugh, Patty. Give me the flying. Oh no! Now she's sticking her tongue out. I hate this. I love this. I really love this. So it's like we're getting to really the basic building blocks so deep that most people don't even know they're there or wouldn't acknowledge that it matters. But I think our collective knowledge is that these things matter dramatically, and the more that we can bring these into ourselves, into our practice, the more effective we'll be, and the calmer we'll be, because we're not expecting to go from A to Z in 3 quick steps.
And as we know, a calm body is a receptive body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I want to pick up on 2 or 3 things that I've heard from the 2 of you. Starting with the notion that you talked about, Jerry, cultural humility.
Mm-hmm.
And how we change, and what you said about the way I think you said at one point, the only way we change is through our mistakes.
Yeah.
I agree that we learn a lot from our mistakes. It's not the only way.
Okay. That's
Because after you make a mistake, after you fail, if you're going to go on, you have to pick yourself up and try again. And usually you succeed at some point. And you need that experience of success to remind you of the value of making the mistake. You learned from the mistake, and the next time you tried, because of that, you succeeded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So grit, our ability to
Grit,
go on after a mistake.
perseverance, yeah.
okay.
Grit is overused, but yeah.
That's fair.
I never use grit.
Yeah.
Grits, but not grit.
And the other thing about doing it wrong, it's true that we get way too many messages in our culture about being wrong or doing wrong or avoiding doing it wrong, and getting criticized by others and by ourselves internally for that.
Yeah.
We do that to a great fault. When you're talking about working with, relating to, building relationships with people from other cultures, like black people in our case, we're charged with practicing cultural humility. And some of the mistakes we make, which could be labeled white supremacist, are triggering to black people. And I think I talked in our first session together about my experience in the last several years is that people of color are much more interested, sometimes exclusively, in working with each other, listening to each other, than they are with white people. And it's because they've been harmed so many times by white people. Because white people have done the wrong thing to them or in their presence. And I've done that too, many more times than I would like to admit. You know. So we do have to pay attention to, particularly when we're trying to build or rebuild relationships with people of color, but all the other ways in which we're different from each other too, age, gender identity,
Ableness.
yeah, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's our responsibility to try not to do it wrong. because of the harm that we may cause.
Yes.
You know, and it's there's everything right about somebody that we do that with or to calling us out, criticizing us, say,
Right.
we've heard that before, we don't need more of that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so we also learn, as you pointed out a few minutes ago, Jerry, about coming together in conversations where we feel very connected, very loved, very much taken care of, and being reminded of what we know. That's another way of learning, because we all, it's not just you who doesn't remember what you already know. We all do that.
Good. I feel so much better
And
now.
another way that we learn about how to rely on what we know is to be reminded of what we know. And that's what we're doing. That's what the three of us are doing to a large extent in these sessions.
And my self-criticism for today would be that I get message after message after message of the difference I make, but my internal experience is not that.
Yeah.
It's what I don't do.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's what I can't do. It's my limitations, which are real.
Yeah.
If we're damaged, like you have been over and over and over for years and years and years, it's very difficult for the positive information to find its way in.
Right.
Because there's so much a reservoir of hurt.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like heartbreaking.
Well, and to what you're saying about your own internal discussion of, everyone's telling you you've done good things, it's really helped, whatever, but you're still seeing only what you didn't do. I mean, unless we're bludgeoning ourselves with that, I actually think that is a sort of a necessary component if we keep it in balance, right? Because if you were just completely
Absolutely. Absolutely.
receptive to everyone saying, wow, you've done so great.
Absolutely.
Right? You could be like, well, great. Sit back on my laurels. I did it. But but there's so much more, is probably the thing that keeps you pushing forward.
Just trying to imagine how you can actually hold that in some... But it's very hard when there's so much pain all around you.
Uh-huh.
In this society, which is like the air we breathe, it's very difficult not to feel that somehow... And it doesn't even have a form. It's not, I should have done this, I should have done that. It's completely, it has no basis in reality. I want to bring the buffalo back. This is not a realistic desire. I don't mean 20,000 buffalo, I mean 1 million buffalo. And I see them trampling down the cities that were stolen from them. So once in a while the buffalo fantasy will come to me, and I feel better about it. So yeah, I mean, I think for me, I have no other arena than this in which I can think about those things. We're not talking about casual things.
Yeah, well, maybe we can expand
completely
this arena.
Grateful. Yeah. So just one quick little story about Ramon Ramirez, who was for like 30 some years the head of the farm workers union. The style of leadership in the farm workers is quite different. It's based on family. It's based on food. It's based on dancing. And everything you do to fight, speak the truth to power, underneath it all is a community. So they have an advantage. Woodburn, there is a huge Spanish-speaking population there. There's an industry that they're based in. There's a culture they're based in. And they've been around for 46 years. They stuck around. That's the other thing. They had 5-year plans and worked them. They had 10-year plans and worked them. I love them. I love them all. I do. And it's continuing with younger woman, is now the president of the Farm Workers Union, Reina Lopez. They learned from their mistakes. They were challenged by women that there were not women in leadership, and they changed. Extraordinary. So,
yeah,
I don't know where that all went or where that all came from, but I feel better now.
Good.
Seems like a really valuable resource to look at programs or initiatives that have found success, because even though, like you're saying, there's all these shared things about the people in that movement, there's probably still things we could learn from, but then diversify parts of it that match who we're trying to work with.
So what can we learn from that? I think it's really hard, as we are doing, to pull people from different parts, different classes, different geographical neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm.
I think the transportable thing from the farm workers is, there's got to be babies, there's got to be grandparents, there's got to be music, and there definitely has to be food, and then food, and then there has to be food.
When I was a hall staff member in college, that was the key to getting anyone to your events. Food. Yeah.
It's given me probably the most joy in my organizing life has come from working with the farm workers here at Pickun.
Well, I think you touched on a number of things about what they brought to their own process that helped them succeed to the extent that they have. Their stability, the fact that they are culturally unified. They're all part of the same culture. They're multigenerational.
Mm-hmm.
And they brought in all these different elements, food, music, etc. And they learned from their mistakes.
And they were adaptable. But more than anything, people want to be together. They want to be engaged in something that matters.
Mm-hmm. So it makes me think about the challenge we face as white people and as a larger society beyond any particular ethnic community, like the farm worker community that you've been describing, Jerry. I suspect that they had the basis for some basic trust among themselves that we don't have.
Mm-hmm.
And we are a multicultural society and world. And so the challenge is, how do we create the trust across those different cultural groups? And a big part of me suspects that that's not going to happen for quite a while until different ones of those singular groups, be they Latinx or Black or transgender or working class or whatever, are going to have to build that kind of community with themselves first. Because
absolutely,
at this point, us white folks still hold the power. And anytime they try to interact with that, even out of our best efforts as white people, we're going to play that out. We're going to play out our white supremacy because we haven't learned otherwise yet. And so it's another argument for me in terms of white people organizing with white people, learning from white people, learning about our white supremacy from each other before we start reaching out to people who are different from us.
Can I add on to that?
Sure.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. So you mentioned, Jerry, the idea of whole humans being in this.
Yes, exactly.
And that makes me think about how the white people side of that, Michaela, that you're talking about, how we have so much work to do individually and together as white people in addressing our own fragility, right? Because we should be able to call each other out for, that's not a phrase we use anymore. I mean, that's the most innocuous of it, right?
Right.
But we should be able to. And then when we are called out, the ability to handle the discomfort of that, we are not good at. I mean, Americans aren't, especially white Americans, aren't good at any kind of discomfort. Let's be real about that. But when our, basically our morality, I would say, is sort of called into question, or we feel that way maybe, when we're called out for saying something inappropriate. And that I could see how that would drive communities of color away from white people. Because if we were really open and we could say, oh, I am so sorry. I am so sorry that came out of me. That I want you to know that wasn't my intent, but I accept responsibility for the impact. And once we get good at that, maybe we can be a little more trustworthy, huh?
And were you going to continue?
I was just going to, the idea that is us being able to accept our learning moments with grace.
Yeah.
You know? I've heard the idea of calling someone in instead of calling someone out.
Yeah.
And so somewhere in all of those ideas, I feel like could be a really important piece of where white people need to go to make the way back to us as friendly as possible, as peaceful as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, and before we risk dealing with our shit with BIPOC people, we have to learn to deal with it with each other.
Yes.
I have had many instances, and I've been on both ends of this dynamic, where one white person questioned the commitment, the anti-racist commitment of the other. And
interesting.
And the one who was questioned was profoundly offended, shut down, to the point where sometimes they just leave. They leave the white group. So, you know, what you're saying about our fragility is very, very true. It's just, it's not far below the surface, and it's explosive. Because if there's anything that we white people feel guilty about in this society, it's our racism.
Yeah.
Yeah, some do and some don't feel guilty about the racism.
I think we're good at feeling something and then not feeling it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you in the I don't know what you call it, a book, but the second book of yours that you wrote, not Lee's memoir, but the other one.
Yeah.
I'm still reading it, and there's quite a bit in there about racism.
So, but the thing is, it's like dealing with racism, blah, 15 minutes a day, as opposed to dealing with it every hour of every fucking day. You got violent again. That happens. I spilled the snacks. It's just like there's no way to compare us trying to deal with racism and living in it. So, I don't know what that's all about. Oh, what is this podcast about? It's like helping us navigate all the complex emotional, moral, political questions that we have to thread our way through every fucking day.
And forever.
And forever. And compared to people who've been oppressed, it's a light load.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's a light load. It feels very heavy, and it is. But yeah, and as we know, I do have indigenous heritage, and Killers of the Flower Moon is my family's story, so it's complicated. I still have not read it or watched it, and I'm not sure I can. We'll see about that. That was my grandfather and father's. My father was 10 when all those murders took place, so it's a little difficult for me to figure out.
What murders are you referring to?
So, Killers of the Flower Moon is about the murders of the Osage tribe. I'm Osage heritage, and my father was 10 when that happened, and it was never, ever spoken about in my family. Nothing about our indigenous heritage was spoken about. It was a little bit, no, it wasn't even really acknowledged.
Yeah, white supremacy makes a habit of burying that stuff.
Yes.
I grew up in a town that was the site of the last public lynching in the country. And there was nothing said about it. nothing. I heard one very brief reference to it as I was growing up from my mother. And aside from that, nothing.
Interesting.
This was a town of 35,000 people with a pretty large black population.
Yeah.
It was a town in the 20s that was basically run by the Klan, as was the state of Indiana in the same period. There was just a lid put on that, you know. And it left the town, as I learned later, because after I grew up, I saw a documentary. One of the 3 men who were arrested for raping a white woman was allowed to go free instead of being hanged. And he ended up writing a book about the whole thing. Not him. He made a documentary about it. And then another person, a white person who grew up in the town who became a reporter, wrote a book about it. So all that stuff came out. And I used it to work on my own race. I still work on it to this day, through contemplation, meditation, etc. But my point is that, like the Osage murders, we white people are very good at burying that stuff because it gets too close to where we're responsible.
And my family buried it because it was too painful to hold.
Yeah.
So...
It seems that anything that can't be whitewashed in a textbook so the next generation will believe something different just gets put in a box. Thank you, Daughters of the Confederacy.
exactly.
Or not thank you, as the case may be. Yeah, wow.
As we wrap up this episode of Speaking Truth to Goodness, we reflect on the profound discussions around making mistakes, the journey toward cultural humility, and the power of community-led movements. Our conversations today challenge us to embrace our vulnerabilities, engage in meaningful dialogues, and actively participate in building a more just and inclusive society. We hope you're leaving this episode with a renewed sense of purpose and a deeper understanding of the role each of us plays in fostering change. If our stories resonated with you, please like, comment, and subscribe to stay updated on our latest episodes. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram for more insights and community engagement. Together, let's continue speaking truth to goodness, because goodness is all around.